Communism is pushing China toward a war it cannot survive. Every serious analysis reaches the same conclusion. Invading Taiwan would devastate China's military, wreck its economy, and shatter its global standing. And yet the Chinese Communist Party may do it anyway. Because beneath the talk of reunification and national destiny, China is running out of time. The economy is cracking. The property boom has collapsed. Youth unemployment is so bad the government stopped publishing the numbers for a while. The population is shrinking, and the party's old bargain, obedience in exchange for prosperity, is breaking down. History tells us what regimes do next. When authoritarian systems lose legitimacy at home, they don't reform, they gamble. They turn outward. They bet everything on a nationalist war to save themselves. For Beijing, that gamble has a name: Taiwan. The party calls it a historical inevitability, but in reality, it's a desperation move, a diversionary war that could end China's rise forever. This is the paradox shaping China's future. A war that would destroy the regime may be the only option the regime believes it has left. Let's break down why invading Taiwan would likely end China, and why the Chinese Communist Party may still pull the trigger anyway. The Taiwan Strait is 160 kilometers of open water. Steep beaches, few landing zones, frequent typhoons, coral reefs that shred landing craft. D-Day crossed a shorter distance with calmer waters, and it still became one of the bloodiest operations in history. Taiwan would be worse. The island is fortified like a porcupine, bristling with missiles, drones, submarines, and modern air defenses. Military analysts call it the most complex operation imaginable. The People's Liberation Army would have to throw hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of troops across the strait, completely exposed the entire way. And here's what the war games show. The Center for Strategic and International Studies ran detailed simulations. Multiple scenarios, different timelines. In most cases, China's invasion failed. Catastrophic losses. The majority of China's amphibious fleet destroyed. Hundreds of warplanes shot down. Tens of thousands of soldiers killed or captured on Taiwanese beaches. Even when the PLA landed forces, they were cut off and defeated. China's Navy gutted. Air Force crippled. Ability to project power gone. One analysis, even if China conquered Taiwan, it would destroy much of its military in the process. That's not victory. That's national suicide, with extra steps. Because unlike Russia, China can't just retreat and lick its wounds. A failed Taiwan invasion would shatter the narrative the Communist Party has spent decades building. That China's rise is unstoppable. That the PLA is a world-class military. That the party can deliver on its promises. Lose that narrative, and the regime loses everything. But here's where it gets even more dangerous. China wouldn't just be fighting Taiwan. The United States has been arming Taiwan for decades and is assuming intervention. Japan's deputy prime minister stated in 2021 that Japan would have to defend Taiwan alongside the U.S. Any invasion immediately becomes a war against the world's most advanced militaries. American attack submarines, U.S. stealth aircraft from Japan and Guam, Japanese destroyers and air forces, precision missiles raining on Chinese ships. China built massive rocket forces to keep U.S. carriers at bay. But that sword cuts both ways. China's supply lines would be just as vulnerable. For 72 hours, entire naval squadrons sunk, air bases wrecked, invasion beaches turned into killing zones. The psychological shock could fracture the regime. Chinese families haven't seen large-scale war casualties in over 40 years. When body bags start coming home by the thousands, the public that was promised an easy victory would demand answers. And the Communist Party would have nowhere to hide. So, if this war would be a disaster, why is Beijing moving closer to it? Because a military defeat isn't even the worst part. The economic collapse would be total. Right now, China is the world's largest manufacturing exporter. It's deeply woven into global supply chains. Its banks are connected to the international financial system. Its $3 trillion in foreign reserves are largely held in Western institutions. All of that evaporates the moment Chinese forces hit Taiwanese beaches. The United States, European Union, Japan, and allies would impose sanctions that make the package against Russia look mild. Freezing China's foreign reserves, cutting banks from SWIFT, banning semiconductor and technology exports, economic excommunication. One study, at least $3 trillion in trade, disrupted immediately. That's the entire UK GDP wiped out in weeks. Chinese factories would halt as critical components would vanish. No semiconductors, no machine tools, no Western software. Export industries collapse as Western markets close their doors. Foreign companies scramble to relocate production anywhere but China. The Shanghai and Shenzhen stock markets crater as investors flee. And here's the real nightmare for Beijing. China imports over 70% of its oil, mostly via sea lanes the U.S. Navy controls. In a war scenario, those supply lines get choked off. Suddenly, China faces the same nightmare Imperial Japan faced in 1941, an energy stranglehold that threatens to strangle the entire economy. Fuel shortages, transportation disruptions, factories unable to run even if they wanted to. Inflation spikes, commodity shortages hit. The cost of basic goods skyrockets as global trade through the Western Pacific, where much of the world's commerce flows, grinds to a near standstill. Unemployment explodes as export factories and industries shut down. Tens of millions lose their jobs. The urban middle class, which parked its wealth in property and stocks, watches its savings evaporate. For 3 decades, the Chinese Communist Party's primary claim to legitimacy has been simple: we deliver prosperity. When that prosperity vanishes overnight, replaced by breadlines and unemployment, the social contract shatters. Nationalist fervor can rally support for war, but only if the war is short and victorious. If the promised easy reunion turns into a grinding, bloody stalemate, with mounting casualties and collapsing living standards, public opinion will turn fast. History is littered with regimes that started wars to unify the nation, only to watch those wars tear the nation apart. And this is where rational logic says, don't do it. The costs are too high. The risks are too great. The outcome, too uncertain. But communism doesn't operate on rational logic. Because behind all the military bluster and economic power, China today is a nation approaching a breaking point. The cracks aren't visible from satellite photos or GDP charts. They're in the empty apartments stretching across ghost cities, in the faces of college graduates who can't find jobs, in the local government offices where officials can't pay salaries anymore. China's economy, once the engine of the Communist Party's legitimacy, is stalling out. For 30 years, the deal was simple: surrender political freedom and the party will make you rich. It worked. Hundreds of millions escaped poverty. The middle class exploded. Home values soared. But that era is over. China's property sector, long the primary store of household wealth, is in free fall. Giants like Evergrande defaulted. Home prices are dropping. New construction has ground to a halt. Here's the scale of the disaster. Up to 70% of Chinese household assets are tied up in real estate. That's far higher than most countries, which means every 5% drop in property values erases trillions of yuan in middle-class wealth. In major cities, property values have already fallen by double digits from their peak. Families who felt secure just a few years ago are watching their nest eggs evaporate. The dream of intergenerational wealth, buying an apartment for your son, securing your retirement, is collapsing. And it gets worse. Local governments across China are drowning in debt. By some estimates, provincial and city governments have amassed liabilities exceeding $9 trillion. Roughly half of China's entire GDP. They borrowed massively for infrastructure projects, funded through off-the-books financing vehicles and land sales to developers. But with the property crash, land sales have plummeted. Now, local authorities can barely pay civil servants' salaries, let alone maintain schools, hospitals, or roads. In 2023, Beijing had to authorize emergency bond issuances just to prevent a wave of municipal defaults. This isn't a temporary slowdown. This is structural collapse. And then there's the youth unemployment crisis. In 2023, China's youth unemployment rate officially hit 21.3%, the highest on record. The government's response? They stopped publishing the data. If you don't count the unemployed, the problem disappears, right? On Chinese social media, cynical comments flooded in. The solution to unemployment is to stop counting it. This generation, the most educated in Chinese history, grew up expecting opportunity. They were told their degrees would guarantee good jobs, comfortable lives, upward mobility. Instead, they're encountering stagnant wages, scarce white-collar positions, and fierce competition, even for entry-level work. Many have given up entirely, embracing lying flat, dropping out of the rat race altogether. This is how regimes lose the future. When your best educated, most capable young people see no path forward, the nation itself is on borrowed time. And then there's demographics. In 2022, China's population began shrinking for the first time since the Great Famine of the early 1960s. The birth rate has collapsed to just 6.77 per thousand, even lower than Japan's. The total fertility rate is far below replacement level. China is already losing working-class adults, while its retiree population explodes. By 2035, over 400 million Chinese, nearly a third of the population, will be over 60 years old. Fewer workers, more retirees, skyrocketing healthcare and pension costs. Current projections show that China's government spending on pensions and healthcare will have to triple by mid-century just to meet basic needs. China is growing old before it grew rich, and there's no fixing it. The one-child policy created this demographic time bomb, and even aggressive pro-birth policies can't reverse it now. All these problems, the property collapse, the local debt crisis, youth unemployment, demographic decline, are converging. The Communist Party's fundamental legitimacy formula is breaking. Since 1989, the deal has been stability and rising living standards in exchange for absolute political control. The party owns the outcomes, good and bad. When the economy was booming, that worked. Now, as living standards falter, as the China dream slips away, the party has no one else to blame. Xi Jinping centralized power to an extent not seen since Mao. There are no opposition parties to scapegoat, no rival factions to purge. When the prosperity vanishes, the legitimacy goes with it, which leaves the party with only one card left to play. When prosperity fails, only one tool remains: nationalism. Xi Jinping has explicitly tied the party's mission to the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, restoring China to wealth, power, and territorial integrity after a century of humiliation by foreign powers. It's a powerful narrative. The Communist Party rescued China from weakness and division. Only the party can complete the historic journey to greatness. Only the party can reverse the shame of the past. And central to that narrative, the emotional core of the entire project, is Taiwan. The island isn't just territory, it's a symbol. Taiwan was ceded to Japan in 1895 after China's defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War. It became a living reminder of China's weakness, its inability to defend itself. When the Communist Party came to power in 1949, the old Republic of China government fled to Taiwan and survived there. In communist orthodoxy, the Chinese Civil War never truly ended. The rival government still exists, an ideological thorn in the party's claim to be the sole legitimate ruler of all China. Xi Jinping has stated this explicitly. The future of Taiwan lies in national reunification, and the well-being of the people in Taiwan hinges on the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Translation: China cannot be rejuvenated, cannot be truly great again without regaining Taiwan. The party has staked its legitimacy on this, and the problem is, time is working against them. Over the past 2 decades, Taiwanese identity has strengthened. The vast majority of Taiwan's 23 million people now identify as Taiwanese, not Chinese. Support for unification on Beijing's terms is extremely low. Taiwan is also a thriving democracy, a living counterexample to the Communist Party's claim that only authoritarian rule can deliver prosperity and stability. Every year that passes, Taiwan drifts further from Beijing's grasp. From the party's perspective, the window is closing. If they wait another 20 years, Taiwan may be lost forever. Its people too distinct. Its military too strong with Western help. its democratic identity too deeply rooted. This creates a perverse incentive. Act now while there's still a chance, even if the costs are catastrophic, because in the regime's calculation, losing Taiwan permanently is a greater threat than the consequences of war. State media constantly refers to unification as an inevitable destiny. Xi has implied the Taiwan issue cannot be passed down indefinitely to future generations. He wants to solve it on his watch. The propaganda machine has primed the Chinese public for conflict, portraying Taiwan's democratic government as dangerous separatists backed by Western anti-China forces. If war comes, Beijing will frame it as defensive, necessary, unavoidable. The groundwork is already laid: air raid drills in coastal cities, national defense education campaigns, calls for self-reliance and technology, preparing society for decoupling from the West. The message is clear: be ready to endure hardship, be ready to fight. Because in the party's mind, the alternative, doing nothing, is worse. And this isn't new. It's a pattern. History is littered with regimes that chose war not from strength, but from desperation. Consider Imperial Germany before World War I. Germany rose rapidly, surpassing France, challenging Britain. But by 1914, the High Command felt encircled. France, Russia, and Britain formed an entente to contain them. German generals looked at Russia's booming economy and concluded, act soon or be outmatched. Chief of Staff Helmuth von Moltke argued Germany should defeat the enemy while we still stand a chance of victory, even if that meant provoking a war. Fear of decline, not confidence. The result, World War I. The German Empire destroyed, the nightmare they tried to prevent. Or Imperial Japan in 1941. Japan's economy depended on imported oil, mostly from America. When embargoes hit, the militarist government felt cornered. Seize resource-rich territories now. Dutch East Indies for oil, British Malaya for rubber, or face economic strangulation. They knew beating the U.S. in a long war was unlikely, but doing nothing meant slow death. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo before Pearl Harbor. Prospects uncertain, yet there was no choice but to close one's eyes and jump. They jumped and brought total ruin. And Argentina in 1982. The junta was collapsing, economic shambles, public anger, legitimacy evaporating. General Galtieri needed a win. The Falkland Islands became the answer. April 1992, Argentine forces seized them. For a moment, it worked. The nation rallied. Britain responded with force. 10 weeks later, Argentina was defeated. The loss didn't embarrass the junta, it destroyed them. Within a year, democracy returned. The diversionary war meant to save the regime became its death sentence. The pattern is unmistakable. Regimes under internal pressure turn to foreign wars as a way out. They convince themselves that time is running out, that their power is peaking, that action now is less risky than waiting. They underestimate their enemies, overestimate their own strength, and accept catastrophic risks because the alternative, losing legitimacy at home, feels even worse. Scholars have a term for this: the peaking power trap. It's when a nation rises rapidly, then hits headwinds, and realizes its advantages are fading. That's when aggression spikes. Not because the nation is confident, but because it's desperate. China today fits the profile perfectly. After decades of meteoric growth, the economy is stalling. The demographic cliff is irreversible. The middle class is losing faith. The party's legitimacy is fraying, and Beijing is watching the U.S. rebuild alliances, arm Taiwan, and prepare for exactly this scenario. From China's perspective, the window is closing. Act now or lose the chance forever. China is not choosing war because it wants to. It may choose war because it sees no other exit. Xi Jinping and the Communist Party leadership are surely aware of the risks. They've seen the war game results. They know an invasion would be the most complex military operation in modern history. But here's the calculation they're making. What threatens the regime more? Attempting to take Taiwan and possibly failing? Or doing nothing and watching Taiwan drift permanently out of reach, undermining the party's entire nationalist narrative? In their minds, the second option is existential. If the Communist Party fails to reunify Taiwan, it proves the party is not the force of destiny it claims to be. It suggests the China dream was a fantasy. It opens the door to questions about the party's right to rule. For Xi personally, the stakes are even higher. He's accumulated power and promoted himself as the leader who will complete China's rejuvenation. Ensuring Taiwan is unified would secure his place in history alongside Mao. Failing to do so, or worse, losing Taiwan to formal independence would be a permanent stain on his legacy. This is how authoritarian rulers think. Personal glory becomes inseparable from national destiny. Regime survival becomes the only metric that matters. If they perceive that war, however costly, offers a path to survival, while inaction guarantees slow collapse, they'll choose war. Even if it's irrational, even if it leads to ruin. Because in their minds, it's the only choice left. China's military buildup tells the story. The PLA now has the world's largest navy by number of ships. It's built massive stockpiles of ballistic missiles to target U.S. bases and carriers. It's developed specialized amphibious assault craft and roll-on, roll-off ships to carry vehicles across the strait. PLA jets and warships now routinely circle Taiwan in exercises that simulate blockades and initial strikes. This isn't defensive posturing, this is a rehearsal, and Beijing has made the threat explicit. China's 2005 anti-secession law provides the legal basis for using non-peaceful means if Taiwan moves toward independence, or if peaceful unification becomes impossible. Xi's statements grow more urgent every year. In his 2024 New Year's speech, he called reunification a historical inevitability and tied Taiwan's fate directly to China's national destiny. The language is no longer aspirational, it's fatalistic. And if that decision is made, the consequence won't be limited to China. A war for Taiwan would reshape the world. It would fracture global trade, destabilize financial markets, and potentially drag multiple nations into direct conflict. The economic disruption alone would trigger a global recession. But for China, the consequences would be terminal. The war meant to save the regime would likely destroy it. Here's why. Even if China achieved military victory, even if PLA forces occupied Taiwan, the occupation would be a nightmare. Fierce resistance, sabotaged infrastructure, years of guerrilla warfare, and international isolation would be total. China would become a pariah worse than Putin's Russia. Every major economy decoupling, technology transfers halted, manufacturing base collapsing inward, financial shock triggering bank runs, capital flight, regime fractures within the party itself, because once the aura of invincibility shatters, authoritarian systems unravel fast. The Soviet Union didn't fall because of foreign invasion, it fell because the system lost legitimacy, and the elite lost faith in their own narrative. If a Taiwan war goes badly, or even if it goes well, but at catastrophic cost, the Chinese people will ask the question the party fears the most. Was it worth it? And when millions of families are mourning dead sons, when savings are gone, when food is scarce and jobs have vanished, the answer will be devastating. The regime's opponents within the party would have ammunition to challenge Xi. Regional tensions could flare. Ethnic minorities in Xinjiang and Tibet, already restive, might see an opening. The entire structure could come apart. Just as the Falklands War collapsed Argentina's junta, just as World War I shattered the German Empire, just as Japan's Pacific War ended with total capitulation, the war meant to preserve the Communist Party's rule could end up being the event that finally brings it down. This is the paradox at the heart of China's Taiwan dilemma. The logic of the regime pushes toward war, but the logic of survival says war is suicide. The rational choice is obvious. Don't invade Taiwan. But regimes that operate on fear, insecurity, and nationalist mythology rarely make rational choices. They make desperate ones. And desperation, throughout history, has led nations into catastrophes they cannot escape. China is running out of time. The economy is cracking. The party's legitimacy is eroding. And Taiwan, the emotional core of the nationalist project, is slipping further away. The stage is set, the pieces are moving, and the world is watching to see if Beijing will take the final, fatal step. Because if they do, it won't just be Taiwan's future at stake. It will be the end of the Chinese miracle. The collapse of a rising power that bet everything on one last, desperate gamble to save itself. And lost. So what comes next? That depends on whether the Communist Party can resist the siren call of war, whether Xi Jinping can see past his own legacy and recognize the abyss ahead, whether China's leaders understand that the war meant to save them is the war that will destroy them. History suggests they won't. Fear is a terrible counselor, and nations, like people, often make their worst decisions when they're afraid. The war meant to save the Chinese communist regime may be the war that finally destroys it. What do you think? Is war inevitable? Or can China find an off-ramp before it's too late? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to Fall of Nations for more analysis on the forces shaping and breaking the world's great powers.